everybody, and welcome back to what is a very cold and rather snowy episode of The Horizon, as you may be able to see. Last night, if you've been following the news, Texas got about 3 to 4 inches of snow in the north part here in Dallas. We also got down to about 0 degrees. For those of you subscribers from Canada or further up north, that is, of course, nothing. But here in Texas, it is rather unusual. In fact, it is the coldest that it has gotten in about 50 years. We also haven't seen this amount of snow in over a decade. So yeah, it's been pretty intense for those of us living in the North Texas area. Many of us are unprepared. I don't even have a whole lot of cold weather gear, as you might be able to see. I'm wearing socks for mittens. But yeah, to get to today's episode, so today I'm going to be talking about what it costs to get my Nissan 370Z Supercharged. This has been a video that many of you have been requesting for quite some time now. I'm going to talk about the cost of the kit, as well as the cost for some of the supporting mods. And to answer the question of why my 370Z is even currently parked out in the snow right now, last night, as you may have seen in that video that I uploaded recently, I was taking the car out to see how it would do in a little bit of snow and wanted to take some photos. And yeah, so I tried to put the car back in last night, and unfortunately I couldn't get up the incline into the driveway. But I did spend some time shoveling snow for the first time ever in my life. Hopefully we can get the car back up into the garage now and resume the video. I'm going to stop talking and try and get this car into the garage because my hands are starting to freeze. So yeah, I'll meet you all in the garage here in a second. But let's go ahead and get to the point of today's video, and that is the cost to supercharge or turbocharge your car. And I'm going to be talking about this in terms of if you haven't really modified your car yet, if you're starting from OEM. Now, I'm going to be completely straightforward with you guys for a moment. Doing this is going to probably run you at least about $10,000. If you are trying to spend anything less than that, you are probably going to be wearing your budget a little bit thin. Whoa. $10,000 is in like 4 zeros? Well, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. You're going to be spending about 10 grand to be able to upgrade your car like this. But that's a lot of money. Yeah, it is a lot of money. Look, guys, again, to be straightforward with you, supercharging your car like this is not a cheap endeavor. You're going to be putting a lot of money into a car to be able to build it up properly. I mean, yes, you can try and buy some parts used, you can try and go the cheap route, but ultimately, if you want the car to run correctly, if you want it to last a long time, you're going to be putting a lot of money into a build like this. So just plan ahead, understand that this is not going to be an inexpensive endeavor, okay? You can go now, I've got it from here. Well, can I just hang out for a bit? No, I don't need you anymore, go. All right, I'll just go then. All right, so let me go ahead and break down the cost real quick for you guys and explain the cost of each of the parts that go into a build like this. All right, guys, so let's start talking about the certain modifications that you're going to need to be able to bring up a completely bone stock OEM 370Z up to become supercharged or turbocharged like this. And again, I will be sharing the absolute minimum and maximum amount that you can expect to spend in each of the different areas, and I'll also be sharing the specific amount that I spent on my setup. So we're going to start off with exhaust systems. Now for an exhaust system, you don't actually technically need to upgrade. In fact, if you're going to run the Stilling kit or Eugene's new twin turbocharged kit that he's currently developing, you actually can maintain your stock exhaust system, and in fact that's a requirement if you want to run this in California and meet emissions compliance. So you could spend $0 in this area. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you can get like a crazy Army Tricks exhaust with long tube headers, and you could be spending $4,000 plus to be able to upgrade your exhaust. For me particularly, I have the Fast Intentions long tube headers as well as their 2.5-inch TDX catback exhaust with 18-inch resonators and 10-inch sport mufflers, so that ran me $2,800 for the exhaust setup. By the way guys, exhaust systems is an area where you can potentially save a lot of money when you're trying to get the car set up for boost like this. You don't need to spend big bucks. For instance, for your catalytic converters, you can basically get free test pipes simply by gutting out the catalysts, although I'd highly recommend selling your catalytic converters instead and then just getting a set of cheap test pipes. And then you can also get a fairly inexpensive exhaust system. You can find one used or just pick up a low-end exhaust system for a few $100 and it will do the trick. Alright guys, the next item on the list is oil coolers. The 370Z is notorious for running warm from the factory. Anybody that's gone on a track day has seen that you will typically get pretty elevated oil temps. So you can get a very basic kit, brand new, for about 400 bucks. It'll be a 19-row modal core. You won't get any of the fancy add-ons like the thermostatic plate or the protective covering. But for about $400, you can get a new system that'll get the job done. Now, you can go to the opposite end of the spectrum and you can spend about 700 bucks and get a 34-row oil cooler. You can get the thermostatic plate, which by the way is an upgrade I highly recommend everybody gets. The thermostatic plate basically prevents the oil from passing through the cooler until the car is up to operating temperature. It helps speed up the warm-up time. So make sure you invest in that thermostatic plate. But yeah, you can spend up to $700 and get a 34-row oil cooler if you want. Something like a 25-row is kind of more ideal, just in my opinion. So I got a 25-row oil cooler. I invested in the thermostatic plate, as I said, to help get the engine warmed up more quickly. And then I also got the protective covering for the oil cooler lines. That all ran me about $600 for my setup. Fuel pumps and fuel pump housings. Very important upgrade to do when you're going to go forced induction on your car, no matter what sort of boost level you're trying to hit. The absolute minimum you can expect to spend in this region is probably going to be on the order of about $100. You can buy a single 340-liter power AEM or Aeromotive fuel pump, and you can get the little installation kit to go with it. You can modify your factory housing, slide on the new pump, and you're good to go. Also, a single 340-liter power fuel pump is probably only going to be good for a little bit less than 500 wheel horsepower. If you're planning on doing 500 plus, you're either going to need to go for a dual pump setup, or you'll need to upgrade to, for instance, a Walbro 450-liter power fuel pump. On the opposite side of the spectrum, you can get a completely decked out radium surge tank unit for about 1,200 bucks. You can get two Walbro 450s for that setup, as well as a new lift pump to go into your factory housing. It's similar to the setup that I've got. I spent about 1,100 bucks on mine. I got two 340-liter power fuel pumps, as well as a single 340 acting as my lift pump on the other side of the tank. Surge tank setups like what I have can be a little bit overkill. It's not strictly necessary if you're trying to boost your car. It's nice to have if you're going on a track day, because the fuel, if you're especially at a low level, may slosh to one side and completely starve out your fuel pump. So having a surge tank like this kind of helps prevent that. My biggest recommendation to many of you would be to just get the twin fuel pump kit from CJM. You spend about 900 bucks. You'll get both the fuel pumps you need, and then you get a nice housing that just slides in place of the factory one. Pretty easy to install, save you a ton of time. Fuel injectors, also an equally important fueling upgrade. Your factory injectors are not going to be able to keep up with the increased fuel demands. You can easily just upgrade to a set of GTR injectors that'll be about 550 or 600 cc. Those will run you about $400. It's a really inexpensive upgrade. Really nice if you're trying to just get a little bit of extra power and you don't want to spend a lot of money. The GTR injectors will work just fine. If you're going to run Aaron's kit like this and you're wanting to make about 500 to maybe 600 horsepower, you're going to need a set of 1050X injectors. That's exactly what I have. I ended up spending about $800 to get the 1050 injectors that I've got in this car. If you want to run ethanol, or if you plan on trying to get a little bit more, maybe 600 to 700 horsepower, invest in a set of 1300 cc injectors. Those should be able to get you there. And then of course, you can go for something as wild as about 1700 cc. Those will typically run you roughly about $1,800. Just make sure that you get the right injector size for the power figures that you're wanting to make, and just kind of depending on which kit you're planning on getting. Fuel return systems, while not strictly necessary, is an important upgrade to consider when installing a supercharger or turbocharger on your car. But yeah, so you don't have to spend any money here, but ideally you should probably drop about 900 to 1,100 bucks on a fuel return system to be able to modify your boost pressure. CJM sells a nice kit for about 1,100 bucks. It comes with upgraded fuel rails for increased fueling capacity. It also comes with that fuel pressure regulation system, which will basically take the manifold pressure and be able to modify your fuel pressure with boost. I didn't end up having to buy a fuel return system because the surge tank from Radium actually comes with a fuel pressure regulator built into it, and it has a vacuum line that runs through the car and connects to that point, so that way I've got nice fuel pressure regulation. One of the last supporting mods that you'll need to be able to make this build possible is to upgrade your clutch and flywheel if you have a 6-speed manual transmission. If you have an automatic, the upgrades are a bit different, but I'll talk about that in a second. You could probably just spend a couple $100, get an upgraded pressure plate, throw that on, and you might be able to get by. If you have, for instance, just the Stilling kit, you're not going to be making a ton of additional torque. But guys, if you're going to be going through the motion of dropping your transmission or paying somebody else to do it, do yourself a big favor. Make sure you get a proper clutch, pressure plate, and flywheel setup and also change out the factory CSC cylinder, because that thing is of course notorious for going out. I ended up spending 1,200 bucks. I got the kit from Z1 where I got the lightweight flywheel, the 6-putt clutch, as well as the street pressure plate, and that has been holding up beautifully for all that I've been driving it. I also, as I said, while I was in there, went ahead and took out the factory CSC and did the CSC elimination kit. And of course, if you want to get really crazy with it, you could spend upwards of 2,500 bucks. You can get something like the OS Geekin R Series triple plate clutch pack with the upgraded flywheel. That thing is a monster, capable of handling over 1,000 horsepower. And then if you have an automatic transmission, the upgrades are going to cost about the same. You really should upgrade your valve body. This is something that helps control the changing of each of the gears in your automatic transmission. And then also upgrade to potentially a transmission oil cooler, just to try and keep the oil temps down. Alright, so now let's talk about the cost of the supercharger or turbocharger kit itself. Now, I've done a lot of looking online to try and get an idea of what the range of price points are for the available super and turbocharger kits for the 370Z. I did find from HKS a kit that claims it's as low as $4,000 and it fits the G37 370Zs. If you see a kit that's new for about that price point, you should be a little bit suspicious. I didn't really recognize the model number of the blower itself, so I've got no idea how reliable it is. I'm also a little bit doubtful that the plumbing in this kit is even going to fit the car properly. If you've got a budget of only $4 grand, you're trying to buy a kit new, expect there's going to be a ton of other hidden costs, a bunch of fab work, and ultimately you've got no idea how the kit's going to run. If you've only got a few grand, I'd highly recommend just trying to find a used kit. You can get a still-in supercharger kit for about that price point, lightly used. On the opposite of the spectrum, Fast Intention sells a kit, and if you want to go for their upgraded twin turbo system with all the works, you can spend 13 grand if you like, to be able to make some really big horsepower numbers. For me personally, I spent 6,250 bucks on the Top Guns ACE kit. Fairly reasonable, less expensive than the still-in kit, makes more power, is equally reliable as well, easier to install because you can maintain the factory manifold. Now let's talk about what is potentially the most expensive thing for this entire forced induction build, depending on who you ask, and that's going to be labor and installation fees. If you're going to do all the work yourself, you're going to spend absolutely nothing here. And that's exactly what I did. If you're new to this channel, I do DIY videos, and I have done an entire documentation on this build. I've done everything myself, from the oil cooler install to the clutch, the flywheel. I did a differential even. I installed the supercharger kit myself. The prices that I'm getting ready to quote assume that the car is stock and that you're going to pay them to do everything on the vehicle, from the exhaust to the supercharger kit itself. Now, I've been doing a little looking around online, looking at some shops that sell basically packages to take your car and make it produce over 600 or 700 horsepower. And I'm not joking, I have seen installation fees, when I've factored out the cost of all the parts, of upwards of $15,000. Labor is very, very expensive. The cost for installing the supercharger kit alone is going to run you a minimum of probably about $2,000 to $4,000. Then of course you got to upgrade your clutch. That's another grand or $2 grand that you may spend depending on what shop you go to. So it all just kind of adds up. And then finally there is the cost of getting the car tuned. You can get a base tune for this car for about 200 bucks, but I want to explain what a base tune means. A base tune is what you're supposed to use to get it to a dyno or some other shop to get it properly tuned up. A base tune is not meant to be daily driven. It's not even meant to get on boost. You could potentially ruin your motor if you decide to just run on a base tune alone. For that, you could be spending upwards of $1,000, just depending on if you're going to be coming in multiple days on a dyno, working with a tuner. I remote tune with Eugene Turkov. We do all of our tuning on the streets, actually. So we do pulls, we just do daily driving, we collect all the data. I send that back to him, he revises the tune, sends that to me, and then we just keep up that iteration. We've been doing that for a few months now, actually, and that's how I've been getting the car tuned, and I spent about $900 getting all of the Ecutech licensing, the software, as well as Eugene's services from him personally. And now you guys should be able to see the totals down below, from the absolute bare minimum you can expect to spend to what you could do if you had an unlimited budget to be able to get this car from bone stock up to have it turbocharged or supercharged. Now, I'm gonna make a couple of comments here. First off, $5 grand is not a budget that you can expect to have to be able to get this car running properly with forced induction. That $5 grand was assuming the absolute bare minimums on all the items that I was just stating. That means that you are running on a base tune, which is not gonna get you very far to begin with. It means you haven't upgraded your exhaust like you're probably gonna need to do. It means that you're gonna be doing everything yourself, no professional help, installing all the parts. It means you're gonna be running with a very sketchy kit, or you're gonna be running with a used kit that could potentially have some problems with it. So $5 grand is not a sufficient budget to do this. Expect to spend probably at least double that. If you really wanted to, you could throw over 40 grand at this car, doing a lot of custom work to it, getting the car supercharged, making some insane numbers. I could never justify spending that much. At that point, you might as well just buy another car. But I love my 370Z, and perhaps you do too, and you just want to throw a ton of money at it. By all means, go for it. For me personally, I spent about $12,500 for all of the supporting mods as well as the supercharger kit itself to get this car fully upgraded and sitting where it is at now, running pretty reliably for the past about 4,000 miles or so. I want to reemphasize a point that I made earlier in the video, and that is supercharging or turbocharging your car is not going to be cheap. There's no way to get around that. You really shouldn't be cutting corners. Otherwise, you're just going to be disappointed. You're going to potentially ruin your motor. There's just a lot that can go wrong if you aren't going to put in the proper time, the effort, as well as the money to get the car built like it should be. There's a lot of ways that you can save costs here. The 12 grand that I spent on my car included no labor fees. That was all just in parts because I did all the work myself. As I said, you can also look at some inexpensive exhaust options. You can get a kit used. There are ways to save money. But realistically, if you want to get your car boosted like this, expect to spend probably about 10 grand or more. And that is going to about wrap it up for this video. If you have any other questions about this build, leave a comment down below and I'll try and get back to you. You can also check out the other videos on my channel. As I said, I did DIYs on everything, so you get an idea of what it takes to be able to do a build like this. For those of you that are currently dealing with the winter weather from Storm Shirley, I hope everybody is staying warm and that you are not affected too harshly by the rolling blackouts that we currently have going on right now. I've been fortunate enough to have power. We haven't had issues with that. I have been out of internet for about 48 hours, which is no big deal, but hopefully I can get this video uploaded soon. I hope you guys are staying safe and warm out there. Thank you guys for watching once again, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Later.